Mike Rogger versus Elissa Slotkin.
Starts right now.
Rogers, way down at the end of the debate, you will have the closing statement and the last word in the debate. You go first when it comes to time for questions. Your opening statement, you have 90 seconds.
Great. Thank you, Chuck. Thank you for the whole team for being here. I'm Elissa Slotkin. I'm a third generation Michigander, and I represent Michigan's 7th district in the U.S. Congress right now. My life began in service really on 9/11. Happened to be in New York City on my second day of school. 9/11 happened. I knew my life was going to change. I got recruited by the CIA, did 3 tours in Iraq alongside the military, and then came home and worked for 2 presidents, one Democrat, one Republican, proudly, because I believe service should be nonpartisan. I'm really, at the end of the day, running for Senate because I believe in my bones that we need a strong and growing middle class. That means jobs with dignity, and that means making sure we attack the costs that are eating a hole in your pocket. I'm really glad that we're having this debate. I think it's part of the democratic process to just talk about the differences between us. And we have a lot of differences. We have differences on the role of the middle class, on bringing manufacturing back from China to the United States, on protecting our rights and our democracy. But the good news is we both have records. I have been in Congress for about 5 years. Mr. Rogers was an elected politician for 20 years. So we don't have to guess about what we've done or what we will do because we've had the opportunity to be in the seat and cast important votes. I hope we can talk about those policy issues today and not throw insults at each other, because at the end of the day, it's really about trust. Who do you trust to listen to you, learn, and then go and fight on your behalf in Washington? Thanks for having me, and I look forward to the debate.
Ms. Slotkin, thank you for your opening statement. Mr. Rogers, it's now time for your opening statement.
Thank
90
you.
seconds.
Thank you for Channel 7. Thanks for the panelists for being here. Thanks for Elissa for taking the time to be here as well. Listen, we have to answer one question. This is the most important question we will ask during this campaign. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? I've traveled the state, talked to a lot of people. The simple answer is absolutely not. Talked to a mom who was in Grand Rapids, mother of 4. She works part-time. Her husband works full-time at a small factory shop. In tears, she described how she had to go the last 2 or 3 days of the month to a food pantry to feed her 4 children. This is not the only time we've heard that story, unfortunately, across the state. The policies coming out of Washington, D.C. have been crushing to our families. You think about the fact that I talked to a young police officer whose stepdaughter was killed by an accidental overdose of fentanyl with a cigarette that was laced with it because of a wide open border that is allowing in criminals and cartels to run the show. 10 million illegals coming to the United States. I talked to auto workers all over the state and people who are affiliated with auto workers. Their number one concern, EV mandates, are killing their future, killing their jobs. Listen, we need somebody that can go back and get busy on the very first day to bring results on grocery prices, on the border, on killing EV mandates. I look forward to having your vote. I look forward to having a discussion here this evening.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rogers and Ms. Slotkin, for your opening statements. Mr. Rogers, you do have the first question, and it is about the economy. The economy continues to be a top concern for voters, especially right here in battleground Michigan. In fact, about 8 in 10 registered voters, that is 81%, say the economy will be very important to their vote in this election. People are struggling, as you know, to pay for groceries, childcare, gas, and housing, you name it. How would your specific policies help working families here in Michigan?
Some really important things that we have to do very quickly. This is why I think you want to send someone with experience to get busy the first week. We know that the trillions and trillions of dollars of spending by the Biden-Harris administration, 100% supported by my opponent, has driven up grocery prices, gas prices, energy prices. Your housing prices have all gone up. We must get control of the outrageous and wasteful spending in Washington, D.C. We have to make ourselves energy independent. All of those votes that try to steer us away from having our own destiny decided by being energy independent is wrong. And what it's done is raised your prices at the pump, your prices at the end of the month when you're paying for energy. All of that needs to be corrected. So you have to do a few things. Energy independence. You have to undo the regulation. $1.6 trillion of new regulation in the last 4 years. And you have to make sure that we curtail spending to get our economy back on track.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rogers. Now, Ms. Slotkin, you have 60 seconds. Same question. How would your specific policies help working families here in Michigan?
Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right. It is the number one issue I hear about is inflation, cost of living. You can't go to a grocery store or a gas station, anywhere without someone pulling you aside and talking about how they are making choices around what they buy, what they save. For me, if there was a silver bullet that could have been fired to solve inflation, it would have been fired. So I work on 3 specific things. Number 1, we got to bring supply chains home and manufacturing back home to the United States. Back from China, good paying jobs, jobs with benefits so we can afford more of what we want to buy. Number 2, we got to attack the costs that are just our major parts of our budget. Healthcare, prescription drugs, childcare. Think of housing, how much people pay on those things. We got to attack those costs. And then lastly, you got to save more of what you earn. That means a tax policy that actually supports the middle class, it promotes a strong middle class. So those are the 3 specific things that I believe would help deeply with inflation.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. You have 30 seconds for rebuttal if you want it, Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, this is where my opponent and I differ, I think, most definitely. Voting for increased taxes on the middle class doesn't help the middle class. Talking about supply chain coming back, but doing nothing about it doesn't help the middle class. And then lastly, when you talk about budgets in the U.S. government, voting for every big spending bill that came down the pipe in support 100% of the Biden-Harris administration has cost us all of these costs in our groceries, in our gasoline, in our housing prices.
Thank you much. Ms. Lotkins, you now have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Yeah, this is where I said it would be really important that we understand and really speak truth about our records. Mr. Rogers has voted against middle-class tax cuts over and over and over again in his record. It's constant. So the idea that somehow he cares about the middle class and middle-class tax cuts, his voting record says the opposite. I think the most important thing is to be honest about the conversation and say, we have a problem, we know we need to deal with it, attack the biggest costs in people's budgets, healthcare, prescription drugs, housing. That's what people expect of Washington.
That'll do it for the economy. Alicia, you have the next question.
All right, thank you, Caroline. The second topic tonight, EVs and manufacturing. And I will address this question to you first, Ms. Slotkin. In our competition with China, are we investing too much in battery plants and EVs that a majority of consumers are not willing to purchase yet? You have 60 seconds, Ms. Slotkin.
Sure. Look, I don't care what kind of car you want to drive. I don't drive an EV. I live on a dirt road, on a farm. That's not likely in my future. But if the fundamental question is who do we want to make that next generation of vehicles, you better believe I want that to be Michigan and not China. Right now, everyone knows China is eating our lunch on these kind of vehicles. Just go to Europe, they have 30% market share. Go to South America, 30% market share. And America knows that we haven't always gotten it right when it comes to seeing that next generation of vehicles. In Michigan, in the 70s and 80s, we didn't think anyone would drive anything but a big vehicle. We saw these little, very fuel-efficient vehicles. We poo-pooed them. And then the Japanese came in and ate our lunch. The Koreans came in and ate our lunch. I don't want to miss that next generation. And by the way, it also means saving auto jobs. It means making sure that plants like Lansing Grand River, in the heart of my district, we save the 700 jobs that are at that plant because we're upgrading it. So I don't care what you want to drive, but I want to build them.
Thank you, Ms. Slotkin. I will repeat the question for you, Mr. Rogers. Are we investing too much in battery plants and EVs that a majority of consumers are not willing to purchase yet? You have 60 seconds.
Yeah, thank you. This is really important. What a candidate says and what they do in their office for the last 5 years, really, really voted for the EV mandate at least 3 times. And as soon as about 4 weeks ago, doubled down on her position on EV mandates. I'm telling you, it is ruining our car industry. 5,000 auto dealers wrote an open letter to the Biden administration and said, you are killing the car business. Please stop with the EV mandates. And so if you think about what's happening, they mandated you have to drive that car, and my opponent signs an NDA that allows a Chinese battery company to go outside of Goshen in order to facilitate her votes on EV mandates. The same with the $500 million rebuild of the GM factory. You're promoting Chinese technology in America. It's wrong. Let's go to hybrids. People are buying them. You don't have to mandate that they drive them.
Mr. Rogers, thank you. 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Again, there is no EV mandate. I don't care what you want to drive. It does not matter to me. But I don't understand the position of my opponent, who says he cares about American manufacturing, but doesn't want to compete against China. We all learned in COVID, for those of us who were here in Michigan during COVID, we all know that we learned our lesson that we had outsourced too far to China, our supply chains. We made a decision to bring them back. I want that manufacturing here. I don't care what you drive. I want to build them.
Thank you, Ms. Slotkin. 30 seconds for rebuttal if you'd like it.
I mean, again, nothing has happened since my opponent's been in office on bringing manufacturing back to the United States. She's lost 29,000 manufacturing jobs since she's been in office. 29,000. And so the EV mandates that they talked about, 700 jobs, they're going to cost, according to Ford, CEO, about 400,000 manufacturing jobs in the state of Michigan will go away with EV mandates. That is unacceptable, and you don't have to do it. We can build hybrid cars in America, and by the way, sell cars that people want to buy.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Candidates, let's now turn our attention to foreign affairs, particularly international conflicts. The U.S. has spent nearly $18 billion on military aid to Israel since the October 7th attack, and about $60 billion in military assistance to Ukraine since Russia's invasion. As a United States Senator, if elected, will you authorize more budget spending on two international conflicts where there is no ceasefire and no clear resolution in sight? Mr. Rogers?
Yeah, let's start with Israel. I mean, October 7th was, we just passed that anniversary of the most brutal terrorist attack maybe ever. They were stealing people, robbing people, kidnapping people out of their homes, brutally murdering them and their children in front of their families. And they took these folks and drove them into tunnels in Gaza. You cannot have a ceasefire until we get the hostages back, pure and simple. Then you can at least have a conversation of what comes next. Hamas doesn't want that. They want to continue to fight here in Israel. And we've got to pivot this to the real problem in the Middle East, which is Iran. Iran is funding Hamas. They're training them. They're giving them weapons. Same with Hezbollah in the north. They're funding them. They're giving them weapons. Same with the Houthis. They're funding them, giving them weapons, training, and even intelligence on which ships to shoot.
Time, very quickly.
Yep.
Paula, will you authorize more spending? Yes or no?
I would make sure that we support Israel, our great ally in the region, to be able to defend themselves. I would do a lend-lease program with Ukraine.
All right. Ms. Slotkin, same question to you.
Sure. So, look, I think it's hard to overstate how these conflicts have been roiling the state of Michigan, whether it's Israel in the Middle East and Gaza with our large populations here, or what's going on in Ukraine. We have a large Ukrainian and Polish American community who are watching this very, very closely. So they've really come home in the past week. These issues have come home. For me, I think it's important to have a strong American leadership role in the world. I do. I work for Democrats, I work for Republicans, but the one thing that was consistent is the idea that there should be a strong American leadership role in the world. Obviously, what's going on in Israel right now is deeply, deeply painful. We need a ceasefire. We need a negotiated ceasefire where hostages come home, where we go into a different phase of this conflict. Iran has deeply complicated that by firing ballistic missiles, some of them hypersonics, at Israel. On the Ukrainian side, look, Putin invaded. It was the first state, democratic state, to be invaded since World War II. I would believe we have a responsibility to defend the democracies and arm the Ukrainians so that they can push back on Putin.
So to be very clear, you're comfortable with the spending?
I am comfortable with the spending and the strong leadership role in the country, in the world, yes.
Very good. Mr. Rogers, your
I think this is
rebuttal.
probably the biggest difference between my opponent and I. He's the architect of the nuclear Iran nuclear deal. Supported the fact that we released Iranian oil into the market and gave them billions and billions of dollars. Just bad judgment after bad judgment after bad judgment. And it was all on the heels of Afghanistan, which was an absolute embarrassment for the United States.
He cares.
If you look at the bad decisions, now we're engulfed in the Middle East in a way that's going to be hard to extract ourselves and still show engagement in the world, but not entanglement.
All right, Ms. Slotkin,
Yeah, look, There's one of us on the stage who has sat in a war zone and taken Iranian rockets, Iranian mortars, who's gone on dangerous convoys, dodging Iranian IEDs. One of us on the stage has studied the role they played in facilitating money, material, weapons to their proxies, to these terrorist groups around the region. So I take a backseat to no one on how hawkish we're going to be on Iraq. But I also would say that if we want to talk about long embroilments in the Middle East, Mr. Rogers knows all about that. He authorized the war on Iraq, and I do not want to get into another 20-year war in the Middle East.
Which is what we're doing.
Okay, we're going to switch topics here, and the next question is for you, Ms. Slotkin. It's about abortion. Abortion and reproductive rights remain a hot-button issue post-Roe. How do you plan to address this topic in a way that respects both individual rights and differing viewpoints?
Sure. So look, this is very clear for me. I did not support overturning Roe. If codifying Roe v. Wade came in front of the U.S. Senate, I would vote for it, and I voted for Proposition 3 here in Michigan since I voted here in 2022. For me, I am crystal clear. Mr. Rogers has voted for every bill, every ban, every restriction on abortion that came in front of him for 20 straight years. He had a 100% voting record with his party. He never broke once. And now he's going to come out because he's put his finger in the wind. He said that, I need to win an election. Better not piss anybody off. And so he's changed his position completely and now wants you to believe that he's going to be a protector of women in the U.S. Senate. I can't tell you how strongly I believe that you have people tell you who they are when they vote. They are making it very, very clear. He has shown us who he is. Do not trust him on this issue.
Mr. Rogers, you now have 60 seconds. How do you plan to address this topic in a way that respects both individual rights and differing viewpoints?
I think this is the most heart-wrenching decision a woman could ever have to make. And I think it's best made with her family, with her partner, with her faith, with her doctor, in where she lives. And so Michigan came together in consensus. And I know my opponent wants to make this as divisive as humanly possible, and I get that. It's unfortunate. And misrepresented so many of my positions on this issue. But I will tell you this. The state of Michigan and the people of Michigan went to the polls and voted. They voted to make abortion legal, and they put it a part of their Constitution, our Constitution. And so I won't do anything when I go back to the United States Senate to undo the vote of the people and their position and their concession and their compassion when it comes to this issue.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rogers. Ms. Slotkin, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Sure. Mr. Rogers voted 56 times for every bill, ban, and restriction on abortion that came in front of him. That's not misrepresenting. Those are his votes, right? I am so sick of people who don't understand women's health, who don't understand reproductive rights, who don't understand that this is about the rights of grandchildren having the same rights as their grandmother, saying one thing and doing another. Michiganders, do not believe him. He will not protect you.
Congressman, you have the final 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Yeah, it's so unfortunate that she's taken this tone on something that's so completely untrue. I have stated my position very clearly from the beginning. I will respect the vote of the people of Michigan that they put as a part of the Michigan Constitution. But if you care about all women, I think this is probably a great time to talk about Title IX, where my opponent said I'm not protecting girls in sports, and I'm not protecting girls by allowing men into locker rooms, both of which she voted for. If you want to protect women, there are other ways to do it. I think that is an outlier in this particular debate, and it certainly doesn't put you on Team Norman.
We got to leave it there. Elissa, you have the thank you. We'll go to Mr. Rogers first for this next question. Immigration has been another hot button issue in this election. It's complex. So I'm going to ask this next question with two parts in mind. What policies would you propose to, one, enhance border security, and two, improve the legal?
You need to take away the ability for coming across trafficking and unprecedented numbers coming across that southern border. And you can see the problem everywhere. Matter of fact, the sheriff of Oakland County was just talking about another series of raids by illegal immigrants last night in Oakland County. And so this is a problem we have to deal with. We do remain in Mexico. We stop it. You can't have a discussion about what legal immigration and reform looks like until until we secure our border, protect our citizens, and make it easier for people who are here already trying to go through the system legally to get into the country.
Right, 60 seconds for Ms. Slotkin. It's not working for anybody, not for people at the border, not for immigrants, not for our businesses who desperately need labor. It's not working for anybody. For me, it is every country in the world has a right to know who's coming to its borders. We've got to do more to secure it, and we had a deal on the table. This is the sad thing, is that we were doing actually what I think most Michiganders want. Democrats and Republicans in the Senate were sitting together, conservative members, liberal members, and they were hammering out a compromise on the border. The border agent organization supported this move, and Mr. Rogers and his allies came out against it. They would rather have immigration and border as a political issue than actually do the real work and get things done. Thank you, Ms. Slotkin.
Was voted down in a bipartisan way because it was a terrible bill. 2 million illegal nonsense. That is a non-starter. And if you look at letter, none of that worked. If you talk to the mothers or the families of people who have had children raped in this country by illegal immigrants, you would know how serious this issue is and how obfuscating your position isn't going to get it done.
Mass shootings and 2 recent presidential candidate assassination attempts. Thankfully, they were not successful. Do you believe America needs stricter gun laws? Yes or no, and why? Ms. Slotkin.
Yes, for me, look, I grew up in Michigan. I grew up with guns, right? I have memories of my dad teaching me how to shoot ski and target practice with my brothers. It's part of our culture here for many, many Michiganders. And when I was in Iraq, I carried a Glock and an M4 on 3 tours in Iraq, and thank God I had it. But this idea that we can't go after the #1 killer of children in America is broken. And while Mr. Rogers was off in Florida, I was representing this district where we had not 1, but 2 school shootings in my district, Oxford High School and Michigan State University. There has been nothing worse in my experience than explaining PTSD to a 14-year-old who all he did was sit in his social studies class while a colleague and one of his fellow students shot up innocent children. To me, we have to, as Democrats and Republicans, gun owners and non-gun owners, go after the #1 killer of our children in our communities, in our schools, by suicide, by accident. It is the responsibility of leaders to protect children.
Thank you, Ms. Slotkin. Your gun control laws to be able to curb the violence in our society.
Gun laws that we have. We also need to deal with mental health issues that are happening in our schools. This generation of Americans is under mental duress and distress like I have never seen before. And it means that we're going to have to come together on how we get ahead of these problems. Guns isn't going to do it. Matter of fact, the two shootings that happened here in Michigan were by handguns. Everybody talks about the other kinds of guns. We need to get at the root of the problem, which is mental health. And so if we don't tackle this mental health issue, we're going to be in trouble. And I just tell you the difference between where my opponent is on this. The state of Michigan just cut school resource funds and mental health funds, including Oxford, by the way. This is unacceptable. And there are other ways to do it. I did a sector by trying to get dogs into schools so that they could be a deterrent to shootings happening in schools. There are so many other things that we can do. This notion of thumping your chest isn't going to get it done. It's about helping this mental health in these younger generations.
Right. #1 killer of children under 21 in our country. Are you going to do something about it, or are you not? My opponent doesn't want to do anything about it, right? And why? Because he has a 100% rating with the gun lobby, and they give him campaign donations. It's really, really easy to understand why politicians, in the face of murdered children, don't do anything. They don't do it because they receive campaign donations, and they're scared. They're scared because they don't want to lose their election, and it's terrible.
Thank you, Ms. Slotkin.
Mr. Brent would have introduced a whole bunch of series of bills in the U.S. Congress. She did not. Listen, I've been in law enforcement for a big chunk of my life. I was at the streets. Everything from gun violations and human trafficking and drug cases and organized crime cases. Listen, I understand what victims are and how we get at this problem. The way we do it is actually constructive dialogue with these schools, with mental health, and with smart precautions that save kids' lives, not the huffing and puffing that you hear here in name calling.
All right, candidates, thank you so much.
First, Michigan's education system ranks 41st in the latest U.S. News Best States rankings, and we underperformed in key areas like reading. How would you improve Michigan's system to ensure all students, regardless of their zip code, have quality learning that prepares them for?
Yeah, this is a particular issue. My wife and I have been very efforts, both here in the state, be the biggest civil rights issue of our generation. Our kids are not learning how to read. Here in Michigan, 39% of third graders could read at grade level. 39%. If you don't read in the fourth grade, by the fourth grade, you have a 70% chance of going to prison welfare. This is so unacceptable. And we support reading reclamation programs where they go into the school, they take these kids out an hour a day, intensive tutoring, and they do it with, this is the secret sauce now, phonics, and get kids reading back at grade level. The amazing progress we could make if we invest in these reading reclamation programs to get kids reading again would change America. Forbes said $1.7 trillion to our economy if we get
Mr.
kids
Rogers.
reading at the 12th grade by the 12th grade.
Thank you. Education system to ensure all students, regardless of their zip code, have access to high quality learning that ability of any leader to make sure that the next generation gets educated. Access to education, no matter what community you're from, for the jobs of the future, right? Society. To me, for a lot of funding to make sure fully funded. We've had a problem with that here in Michigan. We have a pay our teachers, right, to leave teaching. There are staff schools 5 days a week, even after COVID, because they just don't have enough staff. So we have a whole sort of generational problem